What album is Last in Line on? We'll do that next week.
The Last in Line album
Perfect.
comes after this. Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris here with you for another episode. This week we go back 40 years to Holy Diver, Dio's debut album from 1983. But before we get there, Chris, my friend, how are you?
Feeling old. How about you?
Well, considering I think I was 9 months when this album came out, I'm feeling very, very old. Before we get into that and some of the other stuff we've been listening to, as we always do, I want to give a best wishes to Charles, one of our Patreon members and a new fan of the show, relatively new fan of the show. He's going through some stuff right now. He's having some medical issues. I hope that you hear this. I hope it makes you feel a little bit better. And we really appreciate your support. Obviously, we want you to kick out of this as soon as possible.
Yeah, seconded. Just heard the news, but hopefully everything works itself out and hang in there. We love you, buddy.
I also want to thank all the new Patreon members who have joined in the last week or two. We really appreciate the support. It's going well, and we obviously would ask everyone who listens to the show on the regular basis, if you want to listen to it ad-free or any of the other perks that we're offering, we invite you to join us at patreon.com. You can obviously see us in the description below. So cheers to all of you. And with that, I feel like it was a busy week for music. Did you find that yourself, or was it just me?
Song wise, yes. Album wise, not as much. Although I'm finding myself a little bit behind the eight ball, as it were. But I'm trying my best to keep up. But definitely, some albums popping up here and there. But I will say that a couple of singles have popped up, and literally today, we're recording on Tuesday, May 16th. The band Ghost. We talked about how they have an EP coming out of covers called Phantomime, and they did a really excellent cover of Genesis's Jesus He Knows Me, and now their second single has been released, which when I saw it, thought was a cover of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom of the Opera from the play of the same name. No, as a matter of fact, it is a cover of Iron Maiden's Phantom of the Opera from their debut self-titled album, and it's pretty cool. Like, although if you pictured Ghost doing an Iron Maiden song, they pretty much hit the nail on the head. They didn't try anything off the beaten path.
Stayed in their lane, so to speak, I guess.
Yeah, but it's cool. It's just a cool hearing the lead singer's name. Is it Papa Emeritus? Is that what we're calling him?
Today,
his like unique style vocals instead of the old school vocals of who was the original Maiden singer?
Paul
name
Di'Anno.
Escapes me. Yeah, I was gonna say Paul O'Neill, and not even the Sabotage Paul O'Neill, the Yankees Paul O'Neill. And then not to be outdone, but in that same area, Charlotte Wessels and Zora Koch, that is her name. They did a cover of Ghost's "Mary on a Cross," and that came out just a couple of days ago as well. Former Delaine singer. So I think you had made the joke that now Iron Maiden has to do a cover of a Charlotte Wessels song, and I suggested "The Gathering."
I won't hold my breath on that, but it would be interesting to hear. I'll be honest.
Yeah. And then Art Nation released another single from their upcoming album Inception, songs called 1001. I'm really looking forward to that album. And
how did it compare with the first single? I haven't heard it yet, but I loved the first single, and I'm wondering, is it just as heavy as the first one, or is it a little more, a little lighter?
I think it's kind of. I don't know if I liked it as much as the first one, but it's in that same vein. So I think you'll be pleased. And the one other thing I wanted to mention, this actually came out a couple weeks ago, but I just missed it, but Mob Rules has a new single called "Hymn of the Damned," um, and I don't know that they have a new album or anything planned. They're kind of overdue for it, but I feel like every year they drop like a random single, and here's another one. It's pretty much like what you would want to hear from Mob Rules. It's kind of like almost like a modern Iron Maiden kind of vibe, like a modern '80s Iron Maiden, not to be compared with a modern regular Iron Maiden. But, cool track, and it's cool to see that they're still dropping songs, even if it's just a song here or there, not a full album. And I mean, just not to go into detail, but like there were new singles by Bloodbound and Glory Hammer and Rhapsody of Fire, just a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff happening. I haven't had a chance to listen to everything, but I plan on getting there eventually.
I want to mention two albums that I listened to pretty much on repeat this week when I wasn't listening to Dio. Two albums that really have some similarities, but are kind of in different lanes, so to speak. But the one commonality between both of them is that they're both American bands, which is shocking when you listen to these albums because both bands really have a European flavor for different reasons. The first album is a band called Wintersea from Portland, Oregon. They were due for a new album. It's been a while since their 2019 disc Illuminated. And so this album, it's called Woven into Ashes, came out. And it is heavy and yet melodic and just progressive in many ways. But it also has that black metal touch to it as well. There's a lot going on here, but it's easy to sink your teeth into. A very, very good album. And a pleasant surprise because I like their old material, but sometimes for a band that's not, so established, sometimes that gap can be a little bit jarring. But no, they picked up right where they left off. I really, really enjoyed this. Did you have a chance to listen to it yet? I know I had recommended it to you earlier in the week.
It's in the queue. I haven't gotten to it yet, but I plan on it, and I'm assuming the band you're going to mention next, they're also on my to-do list.
Yeah, they are. We're going to go 3,000 miles east to Connecticut, of all places. I have to thank the guys at the MSR cast because I had no idea. This was not on my radar at all, but they were talking about it on their most recent episode. So I gave it a shot. And the band is called Fires in the Distance. Their new album is called Air Not Meant for Us. Oh my, this album is fantastic. It is melodic death metal, but it's very doomy. So it has that slower vibe on many tracks, almost like a Swallow the Sun or something in that kind of vein. And this just hit all the right buttons. And I think that what really did it for me was that they were very keyboard heavy. And that's why I thought you might like it in particular, because it's not just doom metal, but a lot of the hooks are piano or keyboard driven. Really, really good album. I've listened to it a bunch. I kind of want to listen to it again when we're finished recording. Just a really solid album and kind of a pleasant surprise because I had never heard of these guys.
I have those two albums along with the new Burning Witches album, The Dark Tower, and the Dark Side of the Moon album, Metamorphosis. Although I have to admit I've heard about half the tracks because they all were released as singles. But
so I listened to that as well. And what's interesting is I didn't realize that the bulk of that album is actually covers from different movies or TV shows or different or kind of different things kind of in the fantasy realm. It's only 3 new tracks, but it was an enjoyable listen to say the least.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I especially liked the May It Be cover song, which included Charlotte Wessels, who we mentioned earlier, but just more from our favorite one of our favorite female vocalists, Melissa Bonney of Ad Infinitum, who we will be very excited to see perform at Prague Power this year. Yes, those are the 4 albums that came out recently that I have. I have to listen to that. I'm looking forward to digging into. But thankfully, there hasn't been a slew of albums that I've been super interested in listening to during this kind of period of time where I just have not had the opportunity to sit down and really digest too much stuff outside of what we do on the podcast.
Well, I think that's going to change this week. I know the Sleep Token album comes out on Friday. The Arjen Lucassen Prague rock album comes out, amongst other things. So I'm going to be busy this week. I am so eager to hear that Sleep Token album. I don't think it could possibly be better than the last one, but then again, they're blowing up on XM radio. So for whatever
Yep,
that's
and
worth.
people are blowing up at their shows.
Apparently, if you recall. So that
I actually got that clip sent to me by our good friend. I'm sure you can figure out who it was. Sent me that clip. Who do you think it was?
it had to be Mr. Michael Crea.
Yeah, of course.
I had that one pegged. Shout out to Mike, the smelliest man in the room. But I digress. I want to talk about Dio. I want to talk about Holy Diver, and it's kind of interesting. I've had this episode pegged for a long time. It's the 40th anniversary, as I said, of his debut album, which came out May 25th, 1983. What I did not realize, and this is complete happenstance, is that today, the day we record, May 16th, actually marks the 13th anniversary of his passing, which was just complete happenstance. But I think it, to the extent that the man deserves a tribute, he was revolutionary in many ways, obviously for his time in Rainbow and Sabbath. And I can't think of a better tribute than his first, full length solo album going back 40 years. I have a story as to kind of how Dio first got on my radar because I remember it vividly. I'm curious if you remember your first time hearing his vocals, and I know we touched upon this potentially in the Sabbath episode we did, but I'm not. I know that Sabbath wasn't the first time that you had heard him, except for maybe the Wayne's World soundtrack.
Yeah, it was actually. I think I had mentioned it was the Aerosmith cover of "Dream On" that he sang on with Yngwie on guitars. I think that was probably the first time I heard him, if not just in passing on classic rock radio. Although I don't know how much like new era Sabbath, which I would consider Dio's time as being, was being played on the radio in the late '80s, early '90s. I guess not all of it had even come out yet that he was a part of, based on the album we talked about around that Wayne's World time. So and then I would just kind of come to learn about what a legend he is in the metal community, and I've heard so many great stories about what a like awesome guy he was just personally. So yeah, this was definitely my first dive into any of his solo albums, although I did know two songs quite well, and I'm sure you can guess which two those were.
I can. It's interesting because this was not the first time I had. Holy Diver wasn't my first foray into Dio. It was actually the next album, and specifically the single for The Last in Line. Obviously, I didn't hear it, 40 years ago. But what I did do is when I was in high school, I had sent away on eBay for 2 VHS cassettes that were just dubbed like random metal videos. And it had everything from Halloween's I Can to Dokken to Ozzy. I mean, it ran the gamut. But at the same time, and this was going back to 1998, I remember seeing the most absurd video for The Last in Line. And although the video itself was completely hysterical, I loved the song and I just couldn't get enough of it. I would go out very soon thereafter. I would buy the Dio anthology, which was kind of a best of. And then ultimately I wound up getting, those first two albums, Holy Diver and The Last in Line. And so I've been listening to this album for the better part of 25 years just because I couldn't get enough. And I had the pleasure of seeing him in concert a number of times. So I've seen probably half, if not more, of this album performed live. I'm just I'm kind of a fanboy for his vocals, and I happen to love other things about this album. Normally, we don't talk in advance about the album, but you did make a passing comment that after about 4 listens, this hadn't really clicked for you, and I was a little surprised because with some of the thrashier stuff we've been listening to, which I think is a little less accessible, I was surprised that this didn't kind of hit you right away, just because it's kind of more straightforward. It's certainly not as fast. And I'm just wondering if your opinion changed at all, like, with the last couple of listens.
I'd say that it's changed slightly for the better, but in all honesty, like my biggest hope was that I was going to find a song that I would like more than the two songs that I knew really well, and I don't think that that happened. And that I think that in and of itself was a little bit disappointing, or I mean, maybe just the two most popular songs are that for a reason.
They were also the singles on the album, with Holy Diver coming out first and then Rainbow in the Dark coming out a little later in the year. So, I mean, listen, I'll be honest. There's a reason why you like those two songs. There's a reason why you've heard those two songs. I have my own thoughts. I'll get to those. It's the other tracks really that I look forward to almost talking about more, just because I feel like the other ones have been talked about so much, and I don't know that anyone has done a deep dive into Gypsy, but we'll certainly get there. Uh, what always struck me is not odd but kind of interesting about Dio was that I used to hear rumors that back in the early 80s or the mid 80s, when he was doing live shows, that they'd be shooting off M80s in the crowd, and I always said to myself, but this music is not that heavy. Like, I didn't quite understand why there were these rumors that were abound, but in retrospect, I don't think any of that was true, but apparently it was a sight to behold in 1985. And certainly, I thought he still had a golden voice in 2005 and 1999 when I saw him and stuff like that. He was just such a clean, classy singer that he was blessed that he never lost his voice even into his later years.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. It's I have to say, like, listening to this album, I mean, to me, like his voice is the highlight, at least for me. Just from a general standpoint, I feel like it's kind of like this for me, a muddy middle ground of like 70s kind of Deep Purple esque hard rock and 80s kind of like traditional heavy metal, and it's almost like it kind of meets somewhere in the middle, and it's not sure which direction it's going in just yet. There's a number of things that really gave off Deep Purple vibes for me.
And to
Particular,
that point, I think that, depending on the track, you either slid more to Deep Purple or more to like almost a Motley Crue or something like that, depending on the specific track. I mean, I can understand the Deep Purple connection or the what you heard. I actually will mention another band which I think is another apt comparison in spots, but we'll get there in a little bit. Just to kind of paint the picture. It's a really interesting lineup. It's Vivian Campbell on guitar. He was obviously the classic early Dio guitar player. He was the Scottish legend before there was a
Drew
well, I'll just
McIntyre.
say, yeah, basically that's what I was going to say, but it just wasn't very funny. So Vivian Campbell on guitar, Jimmy Bain on bass and keyboards, and Carmine's brother Vinny Appice on drums, which is kind of interesting, with the New York, the Brooklyn connection there, and that's kind of the classic lineup for these first few albums.
Yeah, and all names that I think most people would probably be familiar with. I don't know if had heard of Jimmy Bain before, but I definitely was had heard the other names definitely.
And Jimmy Bain would leave the band and then he would come back later on. So as artists so often do, there was kind
He
of
had a short stint as a Batman villain, if I recall.
a that's pretty funny. So yeah, that's kind of where we are, and obviously this is on the heels of two magnificent albums with Sabbath. But let's get into it. The first track here is a song that I have vivid memories of seeing live, because the album kicks off not in a Deep Purple vein. This is one of the most hard, heaviest, most metal tracks on the album, and that's Stand Up and Shout. It's not a long song. In fact, it's the shortest song on the album. It's just over 3 minutes. But it packs a punch in that short time frame. I'm curious if it was a surprise to you that they kicked this off with something that wasn't Holy Diver the song.
No, I don't think I really had any expectations one way or the other. I just thought that this was a good choice. I think Holy Diver, the song, would have been a little bit too deliberate or like too marchy to be like the first track. I kind of like that they went with something a little bit more speedy and more traditionally metal. Although I definitely got Deep Purple vibes even from this song.
Really?
I think it's the tone of the guitar more than anything else kind of
Okay.
gives me that kind of feeling. But I like this song quite a bit. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, and it's weird because my iTunes said that I'd listened to this song like a whole bunch of times, and I just didn't have any recollection of it. To be honest, I saw Stand Up and Shout, and I thought more of the song from the soundtrack. Was it Rockstar with where I believe it was Jeff Scott Soto did the vocals.
Yep. Yep.
But it was who was the actor in the
Mark Wahlberg.
movie? Yes, Mark Wahlberg. I don't know why I was going to say Johnny Depp. That's not right. So I hear that. I just think of that because like they play it at like sporting events all the time, and you just see like stand up and shout. And so this song came on, and I was like, oh, this is definitely not the same song. This is a different song, but I like this. This is the type of song that I feel like would be a real blast to experience in a live setting.
No question about it. I need to apologize to Vivian Campbell. I said Scottish. He's actually Northern Ireland. But what's interesting is you talked about his.
So Seamus instead of Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned the comparisons to the Deep Purple guitar tone. He did a lot of work with Thin Lizzy and Whitesnake, and so he's got experience with these other bands, especially Thin Lizzy, which I think has a very similar guitar sound in many ways to Deep Purple. So not terribly surprising because he would later go on to join both of those bands.
Well, then that makes sense. I kind of had a feeling that there was probably some sort of connection somewhere because isn't there always?
Yeah, there usually is. For the longest time, I actually thought that Holy Diver kicked off the album because on my anthology album, Holy Diver was the first track. So in my head, it was just like, how else do you kick off the album? But it's actually the second track. It's the epic on the album. It clocks in at just under 6 minutes. I don't know that there's anything I can say about this song that probably hasn't already been said. This is a classic in every sense of the word. It's slower, it's mid-paced, it's much more deliberate, to use your word. This very dramatic intro, and you're kind of like wondering where this is going to go with that first listen. But then that iconic riff just kicks off the album, and it's a riff that once you hear it, I don't think you ever forget it. But ironically, the real standout on this track, at least as I have listened to it over the years, I think that in many ways, Vinny's drumming on this track is phenomenal, and I think he does these little drum fills throughout that really kind of keep the song moving along. Not the most complex drum fills, but just beautiful, beautiful stuff that he, kind of put on this to just not make it so vanilla sounding. And to your point, it has, in my opinion, almost a Led Zeppelin feel in the instrumental sections. There's like a bluesiness quality to it, which definitely has that 70s vibe. I want to hear your thoughts, but more importantly, can you tell me what a Holy Diver is? Because I haven't a goddamn clue.
Oh my God, I have it queued up. I have a whole explanation. I'm so glad that I just want to point out that was not planned. That just worked out that way. I want to before I dive into that, pun intended. I want to say I don't remember that kind of that real atmospheric sounding kind of spooky intro that kind of starts the beginning of the song. Like in my head, the song always just started with the guitar riff just kicking in, and I got like a Genesis kind of vibe from like almost like a prog rock kind of feel, and then it would just dive into like this heavy metal anthem that I always talk about how like these kind of mid-tempo kind of gallopy kind of songs have the potential to be boring if they're not done well, and this is not that case at all. This is like just this song is a legendary song for the right, like all the right reasons. It's just I don't know. I've heard I can't remember if you were there. It might have been that one Prog Power that you weren't at where Ascendia played. Were you there when Ascendia
I missed
played?
That. Yep.
Yeah, so they covered this, and
really
Nick Sakal, their vocalist, I thought did a stellar job covering it. It was interesting. It was funny because I just feel like every band that year was like busting out a cover for some reason. Like I remember Divided Multitude, for whatever reason, played Perfect Strangers. Like it was just like everyone was busting out covers. So I just remember that, and just it's one of those songs that I think live, it just like everybody's just fist in the air. And but anyway, I found this earlier while I was working, and I left the tab up on in my browser because I wanted to read it, because I never really thought that deeply about what this song would be about, and it's really interesting. So I'll just share this with you. This is from songfacts.com. At its surface, the song is about Satan and his descent to hell, his dive, if you will. But according to Dio, there's a lot more to it, and the main character isn't really the devil. The song Holy Diver is really about a Christ figure who, on another place, not Earth, has done exactly the same as we've apparently experienced, or we're supposed to have experienced on Earth, dying for the sins of man so that man can start again and be cleansed and do it properly. And he told this to Sam Dunn for the Metal A Headbanger's Journey film.
Ah.
So the same thing happened on this other far distant planet, and all the people on this planet are calling him the Holy Diver because he's about to go to another world to do what he did to the first, absolve them from their sins by having himself killed. And the people are saying to him, "Don't go," with innuendos of tigers and stripes and hearts and being eaten. It was meant to show just how selfish humanity is, that this one form of humanity on this one world said, "No, don't go down there and save anybody else. Stay here. We need you. You are ours." So
Well, I think we can wrap up the episode there. We've pretty much hit the high water mark. That's fascinating. I had no idea that that was the case. So excellent find. Good
yeah,
research.
and just another quick little factoid that I thought was really interesting. This song is an expression of Dio's rebellion against his Catholic upbringing, which he felt distorted the message of the religion. Instead of teaching by love, the nuns would keep order by smacking the kids with rulers and telling them that they would go to hell if they didn't behave. So, a little insight into where his head might have been at when this song was written. But I'm glad that you asked. I was going to tell you that anyway.
Like I said, we didn't discuss this at all, so I'm happy to hear that. It's a legend. He's a legend. The song is legendary, and then we get into kind of the middle of side one here with Gypsy, which is another shorter tune. Definitely, in my opinion, more upbeat, at least a little bit, but it still has that bluesy feel to it, as some of the other tracks do on the album. And I just am always brought back to that first vocal line that Dio kind of belts out, which is really aggressive for 1983. Like nobody's really screaming like that. I think an underrated tune in many ways that's grown on me. I think throughout the years. I had memories of not loving this so much, but as time has gone on, I've really come to like it. And I think that the solos here really kind of show off Vivian Campbell's greatness. He's not mentioned with a lot of the legends, the Yngwie Malmsteens of the world or something like that, but he's very, very solid at what he does. And I think that this is a good example of that.
Yeah, I thought the song was so. I thought the chorus was kind of blah, but the song itself is not bad. It it gives to me, like, I get a bit of that early Aerosmith kind of, like when they were more of a blues rock band than
Sure.
than a pop rock band that they would kind of morph into in the 80s. But I just to me, like, I thought this was more of a, like you said, this is more of a kind of a guitar uh showcase. It's an okay song. I didn't particularly love this one compared to some of the others, but I didn't think there were any bad songs on the album. I think I was just expecting to be, I guess, just a little bit more blown away by some of the songs I wasn't aware of, and I ended up liking stuff, but kind of never getting beyond just liking it, I guess.
I gotcha. And I think that a prime example of that might be the next track, Caught in the Middle. This is one of those tracks that is just that. It's fine. It's there. I want to talk about the guitar riff that kind of opens this up and permeates much of the track. It has a more of an upbeat feel to it, but I don't love the pre-chorus. I think the chorus itself is a little bit better. Nobody talks about this song, and I think that the reason for it is it's just not the best song on the album. Although I like the ending, but the question I have for you: there are parts of this guitar riffs that remind me so much of something that you know, and I'm curious to see if it jumped out at you when you listen to the guitars on Caught in the Middle.
In any particular part of the song, the beginning, or
It's
just
definitely the riff that opens it up, and then they go back to it throughout. Um, if it doesn't hit you right away, I will give you a hint and see if that helps. But I'm curious to see if anything strikes a chord. No pun intended.
it's I something. It does sound very familiar, but it's just not. It's not coming to me right
Okay,
away.
let me give you another hint. Does it sound at all like a Fates Warning song?
Oh, I didn't even think of that. I was thinking more of like a classic rock.
Nope, nope. And I get that, but this riff, in my opinion, was taken for a Fates Warning song. Obviously, many years later.
Oh, okay. Which song?
Eye to Eye.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's an exact replica, but just the way that the guitar, the tone, the way that the chords are structured, to me, it's like it's something that Jim Mateos would borrow heavily from about 6 or 7 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. That definitely makes sense. I don't know why, but like the band Yes is coming to mind, and I don't know. This whole podcast is just kind of stream of conscious, just naming things that I've heard before that sound like other things. But yeah, I could definitely see that. I mean, I can only imagine how many metal bands were inspired by stuff off this album. I personally think this song is a little bit more enjoyable than
Interesting.
Gypsy. I think it's got a catchier chorus, and I just kind of like it more. It's more kind of my vibe. But again, like I wasn't like blown away by it or anything. Just a pretty solid tune.
I'm curious then, other than like the big two, did Don't Talk to Strangers jump out at you at all? Because I happen to think that this is probably, in my opinion, the second best track on the album. I actually like it more than Holy Diver. Um, it starts off like almost like a ballad, or at least that's what you think when you first hear it. And then all of a sudden, this whimsical quality gives way to this really heavy song. But it's the vocals are just so beautiful and so, I don't know, like kind of showing off the diversity of what Dio can do. It winds up being one of the heaviest songs on the album, and it almost has a Black Sabbath vibe in many ways. I love this tune. I'm gonna make it my song of the week. I want to give it a listen, and then I want to hear your thoughts. So let's take a listen to Dio's Don't Talk to Strangers.
But listen to Strangers. We don't want people to not listen to the podcast, and I know that we're strangers to a lot of folks. So
We don't want to tell them not to listen because that would
yeah,
be
I mean,
bad.
you don't have to talk to us, but please listen.
There you go. I like that.
You doing anything on Saturday?
Just driving Pat to the airport, and let me know when you want me to open up the beer fridge. Another 10 seconds. So obviously, I like I said, I think Dio is the star on this, but the drums are outstanding. I think the solos, not my favorite, but just perfect for the tune itself. And I love how it kind of goes in and out of like kind of quiet, and then gets heavy, and then it gets quieter again. And I love the dichotomy between the different sections of the song. I think it's beautiful. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the song that you referenced at the very beginning, which "Last in Line," where it just kind of starts out kind of chill, and then the elevator just drops out, and that's the metaphor I use for when the
Yes.
song really kicks in. Yeah, this was one of my favorite songs on the album, up there with "Stand Up and Shout" as my favorites of the ones I wasn't as familiar with. But just had like a very epic kind of feel to it, and I just thought it was a really enjoyable song. Although I did wonder if this was like Dio's way of telling you to keep away from dating or getting involved with like the fairer sex, and maybe you're better off just listening to metal and just staying away from all that nonsense. Just stick to your red wine and heavy metal, and you'll be safer that way. I don't know. Just my I wasn't able to find another synopsis on this song. Holy Diver, lots of facts about Don't Talk to Strangers. Not as
Not so
much,
much.
but I do wonder if there's a little bit of like Dio was burned by somebody, and this was kind of like his way of writing like don't fall in love. It's a real bitch.
Yeah, well said. And if that's not what the song is about, it is now. So I like that. That's like the close of side one. Side two has 4 tracks. It kicks off with Straight Through the Heart. This to me is this got this little drum solo that kicks it off. It's a staple of his live set. The difference is when they play it live, they speed it up a little bit, and I actually think it sounds better sped up. So I prefer this song live than I do on the album. It sounds to me like a song that was kind of made for radio, but just never made it on the radio. Not my favorite. A little bit too much paint by numbers for me. I think that it's got some quirky pacing in there, but for the most part, other than like a really catchy bridge, it was a missed opportunity to shake things up a bit. And I just feel like they never get out of their comfort zone on this one.
Yeah, another kind of like vintage '70s hard rock, Deep Purple kind of vibe. I really like Dio's vocals on this one, and that I think that makes this song a little bit more memorable than maybe some of the other songs. I do want to just backtrack shortly. I did a little Google search and just real quick. Don't Talk to Strangers is about how we try to avoid the things in life that cause us pain, but as a result, forego that which makes life worth living. So,
I think
uh,
you hit the nail on the head in many ways.
yeah. So a little deep talk there. But yeah, getting back to Straight to the Heart, another kind of kind of mid-tempo, marchy kind of anthemy kind of tune. But I like this one, and I think Dio's vocals really take it to a level that maybe a different vocalist wouldn't have been able to push it
Yeah,
up to.
I agree with that. And like I said, it's not that I don't like the song. I just like the live version better because it's just a little more juiced up, and I think it's great in a live setting. The album version is it's a good track to kick off side two. There's no question about it. I just wanted a little bit more aggression there, but it's better than the next track because I have if there's one song that I have to say is at the bottom, it would probably be Invisible. And I just say that because it has this like ballady quality to it, which in and of itself is fine. And it does eventually pick up, but it's just very vanilla. And like something about the cadence I like, but the song itself isn't exceptionally memorable, if that makes sense. It reminds me of like some of his work with Rainbow 7 or 8 years prior. And like I think it's very good, but it reminds me more of a Rainbow tune, like a '70s hard rock tune, than it does a heavy metal tune from the '80s.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you there. Although I do think the beep 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 beep. I think that part's like that one kind of sticks in your head. I feel like I don't know if you would call that like gimmicky or not. I thought it was a little kind of goofy when I first heard it, but yeah, it's a pretty solid tune. It didn't stick out to me as well as much as some of the others, so I'm kind of in the same ballpark as you on this one. But like I said, I think that my overall, and I don't even know if I want to use the word disappointment. I feel like that's too strong of a word. I think I just had higher expectations, and I just again want to reiterate the fact that I did not think that there were any bad songs on this album, but I was just hoping that there'd be more songs that really blew me away the way that like Rainbow in the Dark blew me away when I first heard it, and still continues to this day.
So to that point, this to me is not an Operation Mindcrime, where at one point or another I've been blown away by every note or track on the album. It's funny because if you go back through his entire catalog, I think that many would argue that this is his most complete album from beginning to end. There are no duds. There's tracks I like better, but there's no duds. But at the same time, if you took the best Dio tracks from all the albums and put them on a compilation, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised at how awesome those 20 or 25 songs were. There is better material in the catalog that's not on this album. It's not all front loaded with this first album. But like I said, if you pluck out maybe 3 or 4 songs from this, 3 or 4 songs from The Last in Line, then you get to Dream Evil and you just kind of move through the catalog. There's a lot of great stuff. It's just, like I said, I don't think any album in and of itself is a 10.
It's well said. Well said. I sometimes I think we're done in by our own expectations being too high, or sometimes our expectations are so low that something that we did not have high hopes for ends up really surprising us.
Well, to that end, we got a request from one of our Patreons that my expectations are that low. So I'm very curious to hear that. That's coming up over the summer. I just have zero hope for this album. So we'll talk about that more when it's time to cover it. But that's a request that came in from Patreon. The next track, kind of buried towards the back of the album, if I'm being honest, is Rainbow in the Dark. I'll let you kind of kick this off and tell me why it's your song of the week.
Well, it is, and it's just all right. First of all, like just the way that it starts, the riff is iconic. It just that little keyboard ditty that just kind of just like plays in with those guitars. It just it kicks in 20 seconds in, not even Dio's already starting to just sing when there's lightning. You're like, yeah, god damn it, Dio. Like I'm in. I'm like hook me in. I'm hooked. You'll know it. It's just, to me, this is such the epitome of what a great heavy metal song is, and it I was like really hoping that there was going to be something that I liked so much that I would have like put it ahead of this, but it just didn't. It didn't happen. So although it's probably fairly predictable, this is my song of the week, and I still think that as many times as I've heard it, and I've heard it a lot, I still never get tired of hearing it. I still think that it's a really excellent song, and I think there's a reason why it was a single and why it's arguably Dio's most well-known song.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Let's give it a listen. I'll kind of chime in on the back end with some of my thoughts.
Sounds good.
This song never gets old. I could listen to this over and over again, and I rock out just as hard as the first time I heard it.
I know there's some songs that I just
timeless.
Yeah, there's other songs that they kill, like and
even
for whatever
Diver,
reason,
to a lesser extent. I've heard it enough, but this I could just keep playing it.
Yeah, that's, I don't know. It's got everything, man. It's it's really just such a great metal song. That's why I was kind of expecting there to be more like iconic sounding songs like this, and it just didn't. Nothing really like spoke to me.
I'll send you a handful of songs tomorrow that if you during the day you get a chance to listen to half an hour's worth of stuff, I want you to hear like another 5 or 6 tracks. I think you'll appreciate it.
I think I have one of the greatest hits albums. I should probably just listen to that.
So I have to say, I've listened to this track 1,000 times, and you nailed it. It never gets old. It's a track that is just iconic. It's timeless, and no matter how much I play it, I can't get sick of it. I think it's just one of the best songs of all time, let alone heavy metal. I just love it. I cannot get enough of it. The keyboards, the verses, the chorus, it's so memorable. The solo is iconic. And I just love that little cheeky section where it's just the guitar and the kick drum. I think it's just a great way to come back into the song. I just love everything about it. And combine that with the fact that it's arguably his best vocal performance on the entire album. I mean, what's there not to love?
This song hit number 12 on the U.S. Billboard album rock tracks.
It is a shame it wasn't number 1. Find me 11 songs better than this.
Yeah, well, in 1983, no less.
Right.
But yeah, it just, I mean, but I think it says something that this actually permeated the mainstream, because I would think that like an early Dio album might not have been on, a lot of people that listen to popular music's radar. And I feel like it ended up on there anyway.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And interesting to me that it's just buried towards the back. Like in many ways, I could have seen this as the second track and Holy Diver kind of kicking off the album. And although that kind of front loads everything, that's what a lot of bands do because they want to get you, they want to get you invested right away. But just a fantastic track. And then we get to Shame on the Night, which is the last track. It's got this spooky little guitar intro, a slower tune, a more deliberate tune, and to me, this screams Black Sabbath in many ways. I like the bass lines here. It's not something we've talked about much this episode, but I think the bass lines really help push this along. And in many ways, the track is kind of like a vocal solo because there's not that much going on with the music itself. It's kind of straightforward, but it's a good album closer, and it certainly makes sense why Dio would put it last.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's definitely a slower paced kind of tune. Kind of interesting that they chose this to. I mean, I would almost argue that Rainbow in the Dark maybe would have been well placed as the last song rather than towards the beginning, and just kind of end with that real banger. But this is pretty.
I remember seeing shows where he closed with Rainbow in the Dark, so it's not surprising. It can be in that spot.
Yeah, but this is a solid tune. I think I think I was more of this kind of mid-tempo, almost 70s style vibe songs than I thought they were going to be. But I guess being that it's 1983 and the guy who was, part of Rainbow, it's not, particularly surprising. Yeah, it's good. I actually did also listen to the bonus. I guess it was a bonus track on certain versions and maybe a B-side at a certain point, but the song was Evil Eyes. And I actually kind of dug this song. I don't know that it really would have fit on the album proper because it kind of has almost more of like a radio friendly kind of like fast paced kind of, again, a little bit kind of late 70s rockish in maybe like a faster sort of way. But I actually quite enjoyed this song too, so I didn't want to not mention it.
Nice. I'm curious, given your expectations and given, kind of taking it all in, I think it's an easy listen, but I'm curious to see what you gave it on a scale of 1 to 10.
I am going to give this one I'm gonna give it a 6.875, and the reason for this is because in the recent times that we've talked, I gave Typo Negative a 7, I gave Hellstar a 7, I gave Flotsam and Jetsam a 7.5. And just to something a little bit more along the lines of what we're talking about, I gave Black Sabbath's Dehumanizer album a 7, and I would probably put this album just slightly underneath all of those that I just listed, which I think would probably have surprised you if you didn't know any better. But
I would have. I'm shocked, but listen, I mean, I think that there are two tracks that are just iconic tracks, like we've mentioned, and if the other ones don't hook you the same, that makes for an enjoyable listen, but not,
Yeah, and I also think that, like, I don't know, I tend to skew kind of high in my rankings, and I think it's just because we choose a lot of things that we know we're going to like or what the other person's going to like. So I don't really think it's like a terrible rating. It's an above average rating. It's just that I've rated so few things under that mid 5 mark that it feels low in comparison. But I mean, I think it's a solid album, and I enjoyed listening to it. But I just really wanted there to be something else that kind of made me look back on it instead of just the 2 songs I already knew going into it. But curious what your ranking it would be.
Well, for me, it's a solid 8. There's a little bit of a nostalgia factor here. There's really only 1 or 2 songs that I think take it down a notch, and that's why it's not even higher. But there's a lot of good stuff here. I will say that our rankings compared to the general public in many ways is actually a little bit low. I know that IGN compiled a list of the top 25 metal albums of all time. This came in at number 8. Rolling Stone had the 100 greatest metal albums of all time. This came out at number 16. So there is legendary status here, but I think that they're skewing heavy for those two songs that everybody knows if they've ever dabbled in the heavy metal world.
Sure, and as we always like to point out, nostalgia is a big factor in how people rank things and how we rank things. And so, and this is just something I don't have a ton of nostalgia for because, like you said, we were barely alive when the album came out. So,
Right, right.
it's that's just kind of the way it is. I don't mean to sound like apologetic. It's just I'm never gonna lie just because it's an iconic album. I completely understand why it is, especially the time that it's released. I think it's a very even though it has a very 70s vibe to it, I also think that as a heavy metal record, uh it's definitely ahead of its time. And also, I don't know if either one of us mentioned this, but for a 40-year-old album, it sounds quite good.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was listening to like a remixed, remastered,
Oh,
whatever,
it's
but
just a beautiful sounding
sometimes
album.
you can't fix a crappy production as hard as some people try. And I thought this sounded really really good for a 40-year-old album. I was impressed. I think if you had told me that this came out in the late 80s, early 90s, I don't think I would have questioned that at all.
Yeah, well said. And it's interesting as we transition away from Holy Diver, which came out 40 years ago. Ironically enough, Black Sabbath has just released a newly remastered version of Children of the Sea from their live album called Live Evil, which also came out 40 years ago. So they've remastered the whole thing. Another shout out to Dio and Black Sabbath, just because, I thought it was fitting with the time, but two big albums from Dio in 1983. Some other news that I'm not sure you're aware of. Have you heard that Epica is stepping in for Five Finger Death Punch and supporting Metallica in Paris and Hamburg, Germany?
No, but that's freaking awesome.
Yeah, isn't that I mean, like, that is a big deal. Anytime you can open for Metallica in a stadium, that's a big deal. But kudos to them. I'm very, very happy for them. I hope this, they've been blowing up more and more with every release. But
I have to say that I think that would be an even bigger deal if something like that happened in the US, because I feel like those European countries, I think that a band like Epica probably has more of a fan base than they would here. So I think that they would be opening way more people's ears to that band had they been playing in the US.
I agree with that. But at the same time, I think Metallica was trying to fill up those stadiums
Sure,
with
sure.
bands that were like gonna draw, that kind of a thing. That's why
Yeah,
they got
and we're
Pantera here.
available. I mean, it is a last minute sort of thing.
Yep.
I would have went with Voyager, but that's just me. And the reason I bring that up is because I have to mention Voyager's performance on Eurovision. They ended up coming in tenth place. They won their semifinal bracket, I believe. Did you get a chance to watch either of the performances of Promise? Because I didn't realize like they treated this like a music video, like a live action music video, and I thought that they were just absolutely fantastic.
I haven't seen it. I'm going to tell you why. Obviously, I didn't see it live. I know a lot of people were able to watch it. I unfortunately wasn't able to. I haven't been able to find a clip of it. So if you know where I can find it, please send it to me because I'd love nothing more than to see both versions.
They played it once. I'm trying to remember. Like they played on the actual day where the votes came in. They played it for the second time, and I think they basically just redid the whole song, the choreography and everything. I watched both, and I was just so impressed. I was so proud of them because like they're just such great people, and I feel like they've come so far, and for them to make that kind of headway in what's basically a pop music competition. Um, and shout outs to Lords of the Lost as well, for they also had a very nice showing representing Sweden, but I feel like Voyager
Germany,
were
I
the
think.
oh yeah, sorry, Germany, my bad.
Yeah.
Voyager were definitely the stars here, and yeah. Speaking of nostalgia and biases, yeah, I have a little bit for them, but let me tell you, that song "Promise" that's going to be on their "Fearless in Love" album that comes out, I think in July. Um, it's a good song, but live, something about it. It's Voyager. Some of their songs, for whatever reason, they come to life in a way live
I
that
agree.
it just that like just studio recordings can't bring, just can't do justice to. And this, I think, is going to be one of those songs that the crowd singing the O's together and everything. Like I think that's going to be a real fan favorite when the band goes back on tour. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention what a great job they did, and how deserving they were of all the accolades and all of the exposure that they got from being in this show.
Yeah, well said. I think the future is bright. I hope to see them again live soon because they are fantastic, and I look forward to the new album. But with that, I believe it is your turn to pick another album. So I am curious to hear what it is I'm going to be listening to this week.
Well, I'll just lead off by saying we are not going to listen to a metal album. But we're also not going to be listening to a Monkees album. So hopefully that
Okay,
narrows it down to a few options. But actually, something that I've
Dr.
had,
Dre's The Chronic from
yes.
1994. Okay.
Oh man, get your rolling papers ready. It's happening. Um, this is an album I've wanted to talk about for a while now. We've delved in a little bit into the early '90s alternative rock scene. We've talked about Green Day. We've talked about Pearl Jam. Uh, an album that absolutely blew me away in 1994 was the Offspring Smash. I pretty sure you were a big fan of this album as well. I'm pretty sure everyone that had a pulse in 1994 was all over this album. Spoiler alert, I think that the songs that were chosen to be the singles are the worst songs on this album. I think that,
Really?
oh yeah, I think that
Oh
this
man, we're going to be
this
in for a debate.
yeah,
Okay.
because I think that I don't know if it was just being overplayed or what, but there are some really good songs on this album that I think blow away the singles. But I debated between this and Ixnay on the Ombre because
No,
I
you
think
picked the right one.
they both have some of my favorite songs. But I listened to Smash way more when it first came out. My copy of that CD is scratched to shit because I just listened to the hell out of it. So a little departure. We're staying in the hard rock / punk rock realm, but I thought this would be kind of a fun little detour.
Nice. I like it. I did have the album. I played it a ton, but I have to admit I haven't listened to it in a long time, and I always gravitated towards the singles. So I look forward to doing a deeper dive into some of the darker cuts that I may not be as familiar with. At least 20, almost 30 years later.
I think I already know what my song of the week is going to be,
Wow.
but I'm wondering if it's been a while since I've listened to the whole album, so I'm curious if I changed my tune after re-listening to it. But this was just one of those albums that I never skipped a track. Like I just listened to the whole damn thing. I might have
Okay.
even skipped like the singles just because I probably would have heard them nine times earlier that day from turning on the radio or MTV. But this is a band that's still out there. They're still kicking. They're a fun live band. Although I've heard some people say they've seen them not be so good live. I've seen them once and they were awesome. But I just we have a lot going on. We have the Halloween concert coming up. We have we're going to talk about our Dream Sabotage set list. So I thought I do give this one what I consider a bit of a lob, and something a little more out there and a little and kind of a fun discussion. Also curious to see if any of the if this resonates with any of the listeners out there.
Interesting. Good choice. I like it. I look forward to covering it next week. But until then, thanks for listening. We appreciate the support. If you can give us a like and a follow or tell a friend, that would be fantastic. Again, we encourage everyone to think about joining our Patreon. We would appreciate your support. And we look forward to coming back next week with something just a little bit different. And obviously, it'll be on the heels of what I can only think is going to be a massive Halloween show this weekend.
Yes, and we will. We should point out that Patreon subscribers will be getting the a bonus episode for May, and the what we're going to talk about is, as mentioned earlier, we're going to kind of put together our dream Sabotage set list now that the band has said that they are going to be doing one final tour, one final album next year. But we're also going to pair our I guess our kind of our review of the Halloween concert in New York City as part of that. So if you want to hear that, that's going to be a Patreon only bonus episode. So give that a listen. I'm sure we'll mention the concert in passing and on the regular episodes, but for the detailed commentary, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button on Patreon, and that'll be part and parcel with the Sabotage discussion. And God knows if there's two bands that I don't shut the hell up about, it's those two. So could be a long one.
Hopefully we have enough tape to record both. But kidding aside, enjoy the week, my friend. I look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll come back next week with Offspring's Smash.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. Take care.